Today, I'm going to be reading to you from the Gospel of Luke, and it's chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. Now, someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But Jesus said to him, "Man, who made me an arbitrator or distributor over you?" Then Jesus said to the crowd, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things one possesses." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my crops and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" May God bless and challenge us in the reading of this word. Darkness has a hunger that's insatiable, and light that has a call that's hard to hear. And she talks a little bit about fear in this, that we wrap fear around us like a blanket, and that always kind of bothers me, that that's kind of the way we live. Fearful, worried, anxious. I got a new to me book this week, and I think the coolest thing about kind of waiting a little bit before I write to you is write for you, it's kind of like, this is what I learned this week, and I'd like to share it with you. So here's what I learned this week. So I got this cool new book that is new to me that I like Henry Nouwen, right? Theologian, scholar, beautiful, beautiful minister. But I never read his book called Life Signs. And in this particular book, he explores how to move from a life that's dominated by fear to a life that's filled with love. He writes, "We are a fearful people. There always seems to be something to fear, something within us, something around us, something close or far away, something visible or invisible, something in ourselves, in others, in God. There never seems to be a fear-free moment. Often fear has penetrated at our inner selves so deeply that it controls whether we are aware of it or not, our choices and decisions. In many subtle ways, fear victimizes us and controls us." And later he writes, "The agenda of our world is an agenda of fear and power. A huge network of anxious questions surround us and begins to guide many. Clearly, those who can pose these fearful questions which bind us within have true power over us." I'm going to read that one more time. "Clearly, those who can pose these fearful questions which bind us within have true power over us. When we consider how much of our educational, political, religious, and even social lives are geared toward finding answers to questions of fear, it's not hard to understand why a message of love has very little chance of being heard. Fearful questions never lead to love-filled answers. Fear only engenders fear. Fear never gives birth to love." Today, we read one of the parables of Jesus, prompted by a fearful question. Someone in the crowd says to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." It's the perfect example of a fearful question because it comes off as a question about unfair treatment. My brother has something that I don't, Jesus, and therefore he will be better off than I. And that is not fair, so tell him to fix it. We empathize with this person, right? We even agree on some level with this person. We want the same thing for ourselves and for our world. This is what we're fighting for: fairness, equality. But Jesus hears those fearful questions. He hears the fearful question behind this request. This is the question Jesus hears: what if I don't have what my brother has? How will I make a future that is secure so that I won't worry about the future of my own survival? These are basic questions presented to us by the world every single day. They're crafted to create an urgency in us to move, to study, to work, to buy, to obey, to fight, to protect, and even to kill. And because these questions that we're presented with by the world are so loud and so persistent, they enter every aspect of our lives: emotional lives, physical lives, even, sadly, our spiritual lives. They seep into our subconscious, says Now, and we become anxious, nervous, worrying people, caught in a question of survival: our own survival, the survival of our families, our friends, the survival of our church, our country, and our world. I like that Jesus isn't dismissive of the question. In fact, the question stops him in his tracks. He turns and looks them straight in the eye and says, "Why are you asking me to go to your brother to argue this for you?" And I believe this is one of those moments where Jesus actually pauses and waits for a reply. Not in a sense or with a sense of condemnation or condescension, but in compassion. Jesus allows us space in conversation for thought, for acknowledgement, and for vulnerability. Room for the person to say out loud, "I'm scared to death, Jesus. I feel unsafe. I feel small. I feel alone. I don't want to go without, and I don't want to suffer." Jesus always offers us, fearful people, a safe space to voice our truth, whatever we feel. Yet, like us, most of the time, this person is unable to, or maybe unwilling, to fill that space with honesty. So Jesus fills the void and says this: "Your life is so much more than this." He says, "Your life is so much more than this." Put another way, don't be afraid. And then Jesus embraces this frightened child of God by gifting them with a story, a parable, crafted to ease them, us, away from the world's fear and toward God's love. Jesus' story, known to us as the parable of the rich fool, is a cautionary tale. It illustrates how amassing resources leads to selfishness, greed, and inward focus instead of generosity and focus toward ministry and healing. The rich fool saw the bounty of the harvest as a result of his own hard work, instead of as God's provision. So he treated God's gifts as his own property, to keep, to store for his own security, to make sure he had good survival in the future, and to ease his fears, rather than as a resource to manage for God's purposes. Now we get this. And frankly, the rich fool doesn't sound like such a fool to us. Rather, somebody who has a nice big bank account, yes? He's got savings for the future in case something happens, in case the market fails, in case there's a big job loss, in case there's a recession. How will we survive without a giant investment to see us into the future, and not just us, but the next generation into the future? Why does Jesus call this person a fool that we see as fiscally responsible? Shouldn't we be saving a bit for the future? Isn't that good stewardship? Of course it is. But Jesus is asking us to guard against something. He's asking us to guard against being lured into the false assumption that we are in any way in charge of our own security. That we don't have power over our gifts or the survival as a church, as a congregation, and individuals. We're not the ones in charge. We've been given resources to manage, yes, but there is a fine line between good stewardship and thinking we need to store up treasures on earth, or, for the purposes of our sermon series, build bigger barns to secure our future. The thing is, parables are tricky things. They stick in the mind. You turn them over, you think about them, you ponder the implications, not just in one area, but it kind of bleeds into all aspects of our lives. Truly, our barns are storage places for a host of things, more than money that we feel needs protecting. And worse, that we feel protect us. Many of us have a hypervigilance when it comes to protecting ourselves. We think and we walk around in a state of heightened awareness, alertness, constantly scanning our environment for potential threats. Of course we do. Our survival mechanisms kick in big time. They come out of trauma, PTSD, anxiety, a host of things. Our little brains remain on guard all the time, even when safety threats are low. This is the reason so many of us feel exhausted all the time and just want to withdraw from everything and stay home. We want to be able to protect every single thing we can to gain a sense of power and control over at least this. And I'm putting a big "this" in quotes because this varies from person to person. We end up compartmentalizing. We tie up our this and our this and our this like tight little bales of hay, and then we stack them in our barns in neat little rows, and then we lock the door. And I'm not just talking about money, right? I'm talking about our belief systems. I'm talking about our ideologies. I'm talking about our theologies, our worldview, things that we've worked really hard to identify and nail down and solidify so that we don't have to do all that work again. We know what we believe. We know what we feel. We know how we vote. We know how we do it. Don't tell us different. Lock, close the door. Look closer at those little bales of hay. Because mixed in with the carefully dried grasses of what we're sure about is also the fodder of our fears. Prejudice, the mowed and raked list of do's and don'ts and rights and wrongs that we've amassed for ourselves, our rapidly petrifying convictions, who is us and who is them. Do we have beautiful things in our barns? Absolutely. Things we've stored, feelings we've cherished, memories of joy, the bounty of seasons of love that overflow, that we experience when we hear and feel God's provision, when we experience the Spirit's presence. Yet even those beautiful things we've stored in our barns, when kept from the light, begin to sour and decay. Stop using them. And still, we fear, like if we dare to cut one of the little strings on those tightly tied bales, we will experience some kind of loss. That everything we know to be true might just fly out of control like like strands of hay because of the wind of the Spirit. And it scares us to death. We fear, like the rich fool, that we might lose power. We fear our own sense of being right. We fear that allowing the Spirit to blow through our musty barn may unearth our very ideals, even though some of those ideals constrain and trap us. They stop us from living the life and into the people that we are designed to be. We can't be afraid to cut the string. This is Black History Month. We honor the triumphs, we honor the struggles, the contributions, and we celebrate the profound impact that Black individuals had and have on American life, from the abolition of slavery to the civil rights movement. Amen? Make no mistake, the people that participated in that process and have helped with progress were willing to open the barn doors, take a hard look at their long-stored and even moldy bales of hay, and be willing to cut the strings so the wind of Spirit could blow through them with truth. In turn, chains were broken. Because of that risk, barriers were breached. And we are grateful for their witness. We are grateful and learn from their courage. We marvel at their tenacity, yet we know that our fear-filled, power-driven society still strives to constrain, to tie up, to shut away Black bodies, seeking to package fresh-mown lies into new bales of hate, and separate and prosecute, and yes, build bigger barns with big bars to store up security for those with white skin. And as society progresses, and I use both terms loosely, society and progress, and the empire works to fill its insatiable thirst for power, we can, we have, and we will see this even more to and apply to any people group which strives toward freedom and equality. We can expect to see bigger barns built, more bales tied, more doors shut. I don't say this to fill us with dread. I don't say it to fill us with despair or, most of all, fear. I say this to remind us that this comes as a natural consequence of people living out a theology of lack, where we perceive that there are not enough resources to go around and that God is not capable of providing for God's people. So we grab what we can, when we can, from whomever we can, by any means possible. Theology is that important. It's what living out life as a fearful people looks like. So when we talk about stewardship in this church and our willingness to use resources, what we're really talking about and what we're really reflecting on is our theology as a people of God. Are we living out a theology of lack or a life reflective of God's abundant provision? And this, again, not just about money. This is about freeing ourselves from living in fear. It's cutting the strings on the fear-based beliefs and fearful survival questions that the empire would love to become the guiding questions of our lives. Why? Why would the empire want to do that to us? Why? Because the empire knows that once we are filled with fear, we are easy to control. Once we are filled with fear, we'll tend to start dismissing things like words of hope and truth and love. We'll stop trying to be inclusive toward those who don't think like us and instead fear them. It's the people that don't act like us or vote like us, to become polarized and separate and exclusive, because that's what fear does. And look, I'm not going to go on forever because you guys know this. And I'm not saying it's easy. We can sit around and we can wring our hands and we can talk about how bad it is. It is. Everybody's afraid. Not saying it's easy to make our circle wider or invite people that don't look like us or think like us or vote like us. To when people walk in the door, that we're not making assumptions about who they are because they're here. That we step back and look at the person before the party color. That we stop back and look at the person before we identify where they are on our sociological and ideological reflection chart. We're here to build a relationship. You heard Trish say it today, bridges instead of walls. The thing is, we can't do that if we're afraid. God never gave us the spirit of fear. When we see fearful things, when we feel afraid, this is not of God. Our fear is just the absence of love. So every time we feel fear, we walk toward love. It's the way that chains are broken, right? It's the way to freedom for everyone. And from time to time, yes, we will act and think and be like frightened children of God. And when we do, we go to the one to whom we can bring all our fears, the one who always creates space for our vulnerability, and cry out. And don't be afraid to cry out, I'm scared to death, Jesus. I feel unsafe. I feel small. I feel alone. I don't want to go without. I don't want to suffer. Because once we name our truth, Jesus always fills the void and whispers, don't be afraid. Your life is more than this. Perfect love, right? What do we know about perfect love? Perfect love casts out all fear. Do not be afraid, you are mine, Jesus says. Greater is the power within you than any power that is in the world. We are strong and courageous. We have no need to be terrified of anything out there. Jesus knows we are strong and capable and filled with the Spirit, that we might be encouraged and courageous and emboldened and impassioned and ready to join together. We're not supposed to do this by ourselves. Trust the one who loves you more than you can ever imagine. Amen. I know that some of you will come to me later and saying, this is too hard. It's just too hard. I don't know if I have it in me. You have it in you. You were built for this. We are built for this. It's why God has brought us here for this specific time and place. We are built for love. Period. God bless you.